Testing. Can everyone hear me? Hello. Hello, everybody. Hi. Hi. Welcome. Thank you. Thanks. Oh my gosh. There's so many of you. This is awesome. This is amazing. Thank you all so much for coming out for this amazing event. It's really, really exciting to see you all. My name is Amy Ellison. I'm the curator and director of exhibitions here at the Los Altos History Museum. I hope everybody had a chance earlier in the evening to go and see the exhibit downstairs, Building El Sueño. We had so much fun putting this exhibit together. It was really a labor of love. And it was really fascinating, I know for myself and for all of our team to learn more about these two extraordinary sisters, Isabel Pardee Merriman and Sarah Winchester, the Pardee sisters. And I'm so pleased that we are going to be able to dig deeper into their lives and legacies with a really fantastic slate of programs over the next few months. Kicking things off tonight, we are very lucky to have two expert historians and authors with us whose work on the Pardee sisters and on the history of Santa Clara County is really unparalleled. Mary Jo Ignoffo is a historian and was a professor for many years at De Anza College. She's written many books and articles, curated historical museum exhibitions, and she's been interviewed for documentary films and for podcasts airing in the US, Europe, and Japan. She holds degrees from Santa Clara University and San Jose State University. Her biography of Sarah Winchester, Captive of the Labyrinth, Sarah L. Winchester, Heiress to the Rifle Fortune, was made into an audio... Thank you, Robin. Very good advertising. Was made into an audiobook by Penguin Random House in 2017 and came out in a new edition in 2022 with 27 additional images. Interviewing Mary Jo tonight about the research that she did for this book, we have Robin Chapman, a journalist and historian and a native of Los Altos. After earning her master's degree in journalism from UCLA, she worked as a broadcast journalist in the West, including at Kiran TV, before heading to Washington, D.C., where she covered the nation's capital for ABC 7 TV News. In 2009, she returned to Los Altos to care for her parents and has now written a fantastic trilogy of books about California, including California Apricots, The Lost Orchards of Silicon Valley. Imagine Vicky holding them all up in the back there. Historic Bay Area Visionaries, and her latest, The Valley of Heart's Delight, True Tales from Around the Bay, all from the History Press. Robin writes a column for the Los Altos Town Crier and now lives nearby on the California coast. Before I hand it over to our speakers, I want to make a special announcement. If you have not read or you do not own Mary Jo or Robin's wonderful books, you're definitely going to want to purchase a copy over from the museum store. Vicky over there will be selling them. And you can do so right after the talk, just over there. And the authors will also be signing books as well. So you'll want to get in on that. Mary Jo, Robin, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I'm going to hand it over to you two.
Have you got your mic on?
Testing.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
Okay. You know, we're especially lucky tonight, not just because we have a full house, and thank you all for coming. This is really great. Thank you. Thank you. I always
And we haven't even started yet.
I always put a plant in the front row. Mary Jo has gotten so she turns down almost all requests. In fact, all, I think. And only is doing this because we told her she didn't have to give a speech. It would be a conversation. I'm going to interview her and I'm going to pull things out of her that I think if you haven't read the book, she has a wonderful book. And you'll find some facts about these two women. You'll see a lot in the exhibit, but we're going to go over a few things today. And we've got an hour. We'll talk for about 40 or 45, and then we'll take questions. So I hope that will work for you. What I wanted to ask her first is, how in the world did she get the idea to do this book? And then how did she proceed from there? Where did she find information?
Well, true confessions. I'm from Southern California. I came up to this valley to go to Santa Clara University. And somewhere in those years probably heard about the Winchester Mystery House. I had zero interest in it. Zero. The only thing I knew, my older brother had a Winchester rifle. And you know, years later when I was teaching at De Anza, I put out to my class of De Anza students, you know, something about a Winchester rifle, and they go like, what? And no idea what a Winchester rifle is. So yeah, at a certain age, I don't think anybody under 40 knows what one is, but maybe 50. So anyway, I didn't have this burning interest at all. Over the years, I did some municipal histories. I wrote a history of the city of Sunnyvale, Mountain View, a Gold Rush book, some other things, and I got to know archivists, our secret friends. And I got a call from one of them saying, you know, there's some interesting things here about Sarah Winchester. You might want to come and have a look. You know, we need a biography of her because people ask about her all the time.
And was this archivist at History San Jose? I'm sorry.
The archivist was actually a librarian, Bob Johnson, at San Jose Public Library.
Okay.
And I said, thank you, but I'm not interested. So then next time I was down there, he showed me handwritten letters from Sarah Winchester, which was kind of, you know, shifted gears into second, you know. So then he said, there's more at History San Jose. So I went to see those. And the reason no other historian had used these records is because they were not filed under her name. They were filed under her attorney's name.
And it was.
Samuel Frank Lieb, very well-known attorney. He was also Jane Stanford's attorney at the time. And he was the first president of the Board of Trustees of Stanford. And a very good record keeper. He kept both sides of the correspondence, very helpful to a historian. And so then from there, I went to Stanford Archives, and lo and behold, more records. So the reason I wrote this book is the sources. The sources had not been used, and they painted a picture of a woman vastly different than was portrayed at the Winchester Mystery House.
And here's a quote from her book. I could not resist the story of this small, infirm, brilliant, apparently introverted woman and her unwieldy house. And the book is full of her little summary quotes like that about the different people in the story. Frank Lieb was also on the board of the Southern Pacific Railroad. I mean, this guy was everywhere. And was he the one that thought of leaving his archive to History San Jose or to archives?
No, Frank Lieb's son, Roy Lieb, also a lawyer, donated the archive, all the papers from the Lieb law firm sometime in, I think, the 1950s.
Okay, so that really enabled the story to be told that you told. Can you tell?
Frank Lieb was also best friends with Luther Burbank, who was really a quirky person. So I think Frank Lieb liked quirky people.
He was an interesting guy. His wife was a little quirky also. Yeah. They built a house, and then they bought the house next door, and because she didn't like her company to stay at her house, you know. Okay.
So they actually built a connector, like a connector between the two houses.
Well, he was making a lot of money from Sarah. At one point, you say during the sale of the Winchester Company or the the buyout, I don't know exactly what they call it, leverage, LBO, something like that. Anyway, he worked for her on that for 3 years, and 1 year made 30,000 from her, and 1 year 20,000 in fees. So he probably enabled that second house that his wife built, something like that. I wanted to ask you about Sarah was a Pardee, one of 6 surviving children, and she married a Winchester. And what were the fortunes of her family like? What did her father do?
So Sarah Pardee Winchester's genealogy from her father back as many generations as I could find until the immigrant ancestor came to New England in 1640 or something. All the breadwinners in those families of Pardees were woodworkers. And her father had some economic downturns a few times, but mostly the family was supported by a wood mill and planing, and the family house was right next to a factory that he operated. So she kind of was born into this succession of carpenters, and then had a real passion for woodworking, and also keeping tradespeople employed was a real. So they were middle class, upper middle class by the time that the children were adults.
In fact, your quote on that is, the comings and goings of wood craftsmen were simply a part of life for the Pardees. So what does that sound like, right? Making up a lifestyle that Sarah replicated in California. She was used to that. What did they make? Did they make things for the Victorian houses? Is that what they
Yeah,
did?
like architectural detail, spindles, window sashes, banisters, even there's ads in New England directories for his wood shop, which was not like a shop, but like a factory. Pedals for pianos and organs, and so
But all
from
wood things.
fine to
All wood things. And then she married a Winchester, and they had been neighbors at one point and went to the same church. So where did the Winchester money come from? Because the Oliver Winchester, who ended up being the sort of executive of many of the projects that made them wealthy, did not start out rich in New Haven, Connecticut.
no, Oliver Winchester was actually penniless until he started earning a living when he was 18 or 19 years old. He went into business with his brother, men's clothing in Baltimore, right outside Washington, D.C., sort of clothing the politicians of the era. He came up with he patented a design for a men's shirt collar. Up to that time, they were angular, and he put a curve into it. It wasn't like 2 years before he opened a factory in New Haven with a partner, with hundreds of people sewing the shirts that he designed. So his money came from the shirt business. He saw the opportunity for an investment in a gun company in New Haven that was going under, and he bought it. There was a lot of back and forth about how much of that he owned and didn't own, and how he took over the patents of a couple of those guns. But anyway, he shifted gears, was going to leave the shirt manufacturing to his son, Sarah's husband, to run, and he would move into the gun business.
And it was right before the Civil War. They were married a week or two around and right before or after Antietam. So this is the time and place that Sarah married her family of the woodworking family, married the family with the gun factory. At that point, though, you note their shirt company was making 480,000 shirts a year. So this was the Industrial Revolution. They had learned to mass produce these things. And it was mass production was women with sewing machines. But the dad was worth about it's true, yeah. The father, Oliver, was worth about $1 million by then, which was a lot of money back then. But that was just the beginning of his fortune. The gun didn't really sell during the Civil War. You would think it would. So what happened after?
So Oliver Winchester couldn't convince U.S. Union military officers to use the gun. Some of them thought it had an unfair advantage. It would give the Union an unfair advantage. I don't know why the Union would think we need to be fair in war, but anyway, the government would not buy it, and so Oliver went overseas, and he sold to both sides of the Franco-Prussian War. They were not concerned about fairness.
So he sold a lot overseas, and you know, those single shot weapons were really hard on the soldiers. If you were lucky, you're supposed to be able to, I think, load 3 while you were moving and people were shooting 3 a minute or something like that. But the single shot weapons were just wiped out of the field by these automatic, basically, essentially like an automatic weapon, right? It was
right. So the Winchester was a repeater, and many men purchased one privately, and may have survived the Civil War because of that.
And what happened after the Civil War is that the West began to open up. And that's where the Winchester became famous, is in the opening up of the West. And both sides of the indigenous people and the cavalry bought them. The rail came through in 1869 and people began, in fact, Abraham Lincoln signed the Transcontinental Railway bill before he died. So now you have people moving west, and they used guns for everything, right?
And then the 1870s, Winchester rifles were bigger to take down big game like grizzly and buffalo
And they
bison.
controlled cattle, you know, with them when they were trying to had them on the range. But after the Civil War, in the 1880s, Sarah Winchester went through a year in which a lot of things happened. Her mother died. Oliver Winchester died. So 1881, 1880, 1881. And then her husband dies. He was only in his early 40s and he died of tuberculosis. So here's what Mary Jo says. I'm just going to quote you. After all of that, Sarah Winchester could stay in New Haven with her aging mother-in-law and do charity work, or she could leave the city of her birth, strike out on her own, and build a new life. And she chose the latter. And that makes her unusual for her time.
I don't want to speculate about the mother-in-law. Could have been a good motivation for moving.
But she was living in her in-laws' house.
She was living in her in-laws' house, yeah.
And she had never had a home of her own.
Never.
So she comes out to California and she has an idea about her sisters coming. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, within 2 years of those deaths, her eldest sister also died at like age 48 or something of uterine cancer. And so that left 3 sisters and a brother. And one of those was already in California because the husband had been hired by Mills College as its president. So she and the remaining 2 sisters and their children, who were ranging from like 15 years of age to 22 years of age, all came west at once. And her idea was that she would have a big enough home where that they could all share. Again, one doesn't want to speculate, but
That didn't work out quite.
I think there was a little too much closeness. But anyway, yeah.
So one goes to San Francisco. That was Estelle. She didn't have a husband at that point. We think she was divorced.
She was divorced.
She was divorced. She took her 2 children to San Francisco.
Claimed to be a widow, but she was divorced.
And then Isabel Bell had come out, and she didn't stay at the big house either. She stayed for a while, I guess.
Yeah, because the land that we're on, at least according to a map downstairs, maybe the other side of San Antonio Road, the house on Edgewood was purchased in 1888. So
By Mrs. Winchester
yes,
for her sister,
for her sister to live in, not as a gift. She was very clear about that.
not as a,
Not as a gift.
as a gift.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Sarah Winchester did not give away property. She stayed on the title
of that property.
of properties of several family members. Yes.
So that is the Winchester Merriman house, but it came with something like 40 acres at the beginning or 25.
Well, there are multiples, but it ended up close to 200 acres. There's 140, there was a 25, there was a 40. So yeah.
And Isabel Merriman was there with her husband and two children, a boy and a girl. And what did they plan to do with this land?
Isabel and Sarah had one plan, and that was to raise carriage horses. Now, Isabel's husband's family in New Haven were carriage builders. So I think they had some reason to go in that direction. But what Isabel's husband wanted to do and ended up doing was planting vineyards. So he was going to be a
Viticulturist, a wine.
viticulturist. That's right. He had the bad luck of planting acres and acres of grapes 3 years before phylloxera infected the grapes of Santa Clara Valley. And so, yeah, there were no carriage horses and no grapes by then. And they ended up filing for bankruptcy, and they owed a lot of debt to merchants in Mountain View. And those merchants weren't too happy that Mrs. Merriman's sister was the wealthiest woman in the county and wouldn't cover her sister's bills. So.
And that's interesting too. Why do you think she didn't pay the debts? She continued to be close to her sister, Belle, but she didn't pay off their debts.
She did not, and she did not pay off anybody's debts. And you know, that could be the seed for some of the hostile press against Sarah Winchester. So people aren't feeling really great about her, that she's not doing this. There was also a national depression in the middle 1890s. So,
and they owed money to like local merchants in Mountain View, whom they bought things wholesale. I guess they had a little hardware store in Mountain View for a while when they were trying to make things up, right? So meanwhile, all that time that Sarah is continuing to build onto her house, right? So there was a lot going on in Sarah's life, and she was writing her attorney about all of these things. So there's correspondence about it.
yes, and Isabel's daughter chose to live with Sarah. So she was, by this time, maybe 20. Of course, we were talking about this earlier. Isabel and her daughter routinely lied about their age. So, and sometimes pretty dramatically. The press report, when Isabel's daughter got married, they said she was Sarah Winchester's adopted daughter, never mentioned Isabel. And they said that she was 26 years old, and in fact, she was 36. So I'm not sure her husband even knew. He was 28.
No digital records back then, thank goodness, right? Now, Belle's house, not only did she buy Belle this house and this property, and all kinds of madcap things ensued, different kinds of businesses and whatnot, they didn't just take the house, they remodeled that house also. So that was extensively remodeled near the beginning. And the land surrounding it was used at some point for raising carriage horses, was it or not?
I don't think in a big way.
Okay.
No, she turned it, after all of that problem, she actually turned El Sueño into a flower farm. And
He raised flowers.
she raised flowers and she opened a little florist shop, in Mountain View.
And how did that go?
Not well.
Okay. So they lost money on that too. You say in your book that Isabel and Sarah, very different characters, were two sides of the same coin. What did you mean by that?
Well, at first glance, you see Sarah Winchester is very reclusive. And Isabel is like in everybody's face all the time. She's really out there, and she's very she's passionate about causes, almost to the point, or maybe really to the point of self-righteousness. And so, for example, she was an animal rights diehard, so much so that she carried out a citizen's arrest on the butcher. So again, these don't make friends, when you do things like this,
So maybe they were both passionate in what they believed, although one was more reclusive than the other. Is that it?
Yeah, so both big project kind of people. I mean, Sarah Winchester's house, and a lot of the oddities of the house that you might have heard of were not necessarily oddities when she's building this. It's big. There's no doubt about that. But Isabel's ranch too, that was a big operation, really.
When you think about it. And it was really just the two of them and their son, because by then Daisy, the daughter, had moved into the house they called Yanada Villa, which was the San Jose house, to be her sort of executive assistant to Sarah. That's what Daisy Merriman, Isabel's daughter, did.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. So, for example, Sarah had this quirky thing. I don't think it's quirky. We wouldn't think it's quirky now. But whenever she bought or sold property, which she did a lot of, she wanted it notarized. It was not required by law at the time. And so a lot of times Daisy would go to the notary in Santa Clara and have the documents notarized.
So Daisy helped her a lot, but in 1903, regardless of the fact that Fred Marriott, whom she met, may not have known how old she was, she did decide to get married. So she left her aunt's employ.
She did. She did. And so Daisy got married in San Francisco at the Palace Hotel. And the family she married, also controversial, they owned the San Francisco Newsletter, a newspaper, and some accusations of questionable business dealings. Notwithstanding, Daisy had nothing to do with that. But the newspaper reported these ages that were wonky, and also that she was Sarah Winchester's daughter. So it's not even clear that Isabel and her husband were at the wedding. So I definitely would suggest there must have been some kind of estrangement there. But however, 2 weeks later, Daisy is reported in the Mountain View Register Leader that she was paying a visit to Mrs. Merriman at El Sueño. So,
So she did have a relationship with her mother. We think it's possible her father, she might have been estranged from her father and didn't want him at the wedding, maybe.
I don't know.
Possibly because he knew her age. No, I'm just kidding. So starting in about 1903, then, when Daisy got married, Mrs. Winchester rented a house in San Mateo to be nearer to her niece for the wedding. I think Mrs. Winchester must have paid for the wedding in San Francisco, and she moved into San Mateo County. And then her point of view, her focus kind of shifts from the San Jose house in the early 20th century to the San Mateo regions, and she buys a number of properties, almost a dozen, I think you said, in that area. Tell us about a little bit about that.
So this is one of the most interesting things about Sarah Winchester is her business acumen. So she bought 100 acres in Burlingame, which today is south of SFO, and 2 houses in Burlingame. There's a street called Winchester in Burlingame, and that is for her. Then she bought a house in Atherton, Menlo Park. It was called Fair Oaks for a while. Anyway, and then she bought another one and another one and another one. And so it was surmised she was kind of creating a space around herself up there. She ended the one she lived in for the last 12 years of her life was not San Jose, was on Inglewood Avenue in Atherton, right off Atherton Avenue. It is still stands today.
So we don't really think of her as not in the Santa Clara Valley, but she spent a lot of her life in San Mateo County. And then what around 1905, the Southern Pacific, which was very powerful in the valley, becomes interested in a right-of-way through Belle Merriman and Lewis Merriman's property owned by Sarah Winchester. What happens?
So SP was expanding all over the valley, and it was buying up these short, small railroad runs. And it wanted one from the village of Saratoga to Palo Alto. And they laid it out, and it was right through El Sueño. And so they started putting stakes and surveying, and Sarah Winchester had never been approached. They were just moving ahead. So she called in her attorney, and turns out he was on the board of the railroad, probably knew all about this.
So Frank Lee was on the board of the railroad. And this line was where Foothill Expressway is now. And it was an interurban electric rail, I think, that went along there. So anyway, what happens? Do they get it by right of way, or do they have to right of way? They just have to buy it from her. Or she has to.
They took it by eminent domain, but they so the first deed transfer is only for like 4 or 5 acres, but that's an 80-foot strip right through the ranch.
And what does it block? What does that?
Well, livestock can't get to the creek. So
to Adobe Creek.
So they did have a couple of horses and stuff. They weren't actually raising, on a large scale. It's not like Stanford's race horses.
But it would have devalued the property if someone wanted to raise cattle.
You couldn't. You couldn't.
So she fought it for a while.
Yeah, she fought it. And I think she really, she wrote a really snarky note to her attorney. Like, I would have paid 3 times the amount that I'm receiving for this land if I could only have stopped this. She wanted the railroad to skirt the ranch. And if they had just moved it over, I don't know, few hundred yards, quarter of a mile, something like that, the ranch could have been saved. And she could not understand why that reasonable thought wouldn't appeal to the railroad. Well, the railroad wanted the fastest, cheapest, most direct. So
they ended up getting that.
And the president of the railroad at that time was Mr. Oliver Hale, if you've ever heard of Hale's department stores. So he was and very good friends with Frank Lee. So yeah, Mrs. Winchester felt things were definitely going against her. And then there's stories in the press that Mrs. Winchester and her sister Isabel went out every night for 2 years and pulled up the stakes of the survey for the railroad. Well, I do say in my book, number one, Sarah Winchester didn't live there, and that's kind of not her style. but I did find a restraining order against Isabel and her husband for doing that.
So then 1906 happens. And she had a lot of other things on her plate because the house in San Jose got a lot of damage, right?
Yeah. San Jose was heavily damaged. So the tower at San Jose reached to 7 stories. The top 4 collapsed. And so then that's why you have stairs that go to nowhere and doors that open to nothing, because once upon a time they did, so.
So she didn't fix a lot of things there after the earthquake. She swept them up.
She had the debris hauled away, and she moved.
And she still had a full staff there though, right? And
Not much of one.
No.
She had the ranch foreman and his wife and children, and she had a Japanese gardener and his wife. He didn't have a wife. His children, and one other family. But yeah, but so she had these other properties, and so she actually after the earthquake went to the houseboat property. It was the 100 acres in Burlingame had a houseboat, which sounds a little strange now, but it was very popular for the rich at that time to have a houseboat to take it out on San Francisco Bay. So I think we're getting flagged.
yeah, we are. We're getting flagged. We got 5 more minutes. We're going to wrap this up. So she's kind of moved her life north a little bit. She's in a kind of more sort of more typical housing. It was beautiful, I'm sure. Mansion's very lovely. And when the ranch finally sells and is flipped and goes to building lots and becomes Los Altos, she finds a house for, or actually a lot for her sister Belle in Palo Alto. And kind of typical, I said to Mary Jo, she didn't even buy a house for her sister. She bought a lot and she had to build there. She just must have loved building. So her sister lived the rest of her life, and her husband died around that time she moved there. She lived the rest of her life in Palo Alto. And then the 2 sisters die kind of close together.
Yeah, Isabel died in 1920, very suddenly, a stroke. And Sarah Winchester died 2 years later.
And she was almost 83.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was at a time when the actuarial tables said a woman would live to be,
Yeah.
or the average life.
Average life expectancy of a white American woman in 1910 was 49 years of age.
Did you get that? 49
They
years
really
ago.
beat the odds.
So when Sarah dies, Belle has passed away already. And when Sarah dies, she leaves an extensive will that she worked on with Frank Leap. And who is remembered in this will?
So the niece, Daisy Merriman, Isabel's daughter, gets a big portion. The properties are sold, and all of the other nieces and nephews, which by this time is numbering, I don't have the exact number, maybe 15 or 18 people. So these are her siblings' children and their children, in one case, a great-grandchild. And they are given trust funds for their life, which is a monthly stipend that they were to get. And then at their death, that trust fund, it would revert to her primary beneficiary, which is the William Winchester
Pulmonary?
Chest Hospital. It's the Pulmonary Center at Yale University, which still bears the name William Winchester. So the bulk of her money goes to there, and then the trusts all revert to there. And Daisy got a substantial amount of money.
She was very kind. She left her assistant at the who went from the San Jose, Henrietta Severa, $3,000, which was a huge amount of money. And when you think what a gift that was, she was very kind to her employees. The last thing I want to read before we do some questions is how Mary Jo summed this up. Today's Winchester Center for Pulmonary Diseases, Lung Diseases at Yale is the most enduring of Winchester's legacies. In it, she perpetuated her concern for pulmonary patients and her abiding love for her husband. It is the closest and simplest manifestation of the values, goals, and love of her life. Yet it is a legacy that is mostly unknown. But you know, when you give a gift, the real blessing is if you keep it secret, right? So she was, very kind in her will and in her life. And I think sometimes we think of her as a little feisty and kind of tough. And yet look how sweet she was in the end. So thank you, Mary Jo. This was just so interesting.
Thank you, everybody.
So Amy, do we have time for questions? Okay. Do you want to take a mic or can people just shout their questions?
We could just repeat it.
We'll repeat it, yeah. So we have 15 minutes for question. Okay, good. All right. Okay. So for the people in the Zoom audience, we had so many requests for this. We've got people on Zoom watching it. So hello to the Zoom. I also wanted to say that Jane Bomey, who's the historian from the Winchester House, is here. And yeah. Yeah, so raise your hand, raise your hand. Yeah, good. So who has a question? We've got one here.
Oh. So Robin indicated that I'm refusing to give speeches. It's not exactly that way, but but this format, I like this too.
I mean, a news reporter would exaggerate. Just can't believe that. So, oh, well, thank you. She was a good interview. So she's got all the information. Who's got a question? Liz, have you got a question? Oh, we've got one here.
So, it at that time in 1870s, it could get out 12 shots in like 20 seconds. Boom, 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 boom. So you can imagine that would have changed the Civil War. Yeah.
Well, and at the Little Bighorn, the Indians had them too, right? Yeah. And they worked. And they worked. So that was really, really an innovation. And if you look at cowboy movies from the 40s and 50s, which would have been not that long after the taming of the West, really, when you think about it, in Hollywood, you will see them carrying those weapons. Jimmy Stewart's in a movie called Winchester 73 or something like that. So Winchester 77, yeah. And John Wayne always has one. Quick.
He's still being asked full gallop in black cowper gap.
Oh.
Every time you shoot, the cavalry has little paper, little stash of gunpowder they shoved in there. And he said the repeater rifle changed everything.
Oh, yeah.
For the cavalry.
Yeah.
Are they still built today?
The Winchester Company is out of business. The Olin Corporation bought the name. I don't think they're making any firearms at all. They're making ammunition though. So, but Winchesters are collectible. People collect them.
But what happened when they expanded during World War I? What happened to the company?
Okay, so Oliver Winchester, his dream was to get the military, the US government to buy his guns. Never happened. So it's a little bit ironic. By the time World War I comes along, the US government is all in with Winchester, and Winchester has to expand to 400,000 square feet of floor space. and thousands of new employees, and they make all these guns for the war. And when the war ends, nobody planned for what are they going to do when the whole thing's over? And the company went into default. And
So that would have been in the teens, right? 1918 was the end of World War I, and that diminished the fortune that Sarah Winchester would have left. It was still quite large for its day, over $3 million. Plus, she'd already given 3 to the Lung Institute at Yale, you know, to the hospital there. But people were in the Valley were surprised that it wasn't larger.
well, the press had said she was worth $20 million. And so they deduced or surmised or made up that since her estate was only 3 million and she was worth 20, she wasted all that money on her San Jose house. When in fact, her net worth was reduced by 2/3 when Winchester was going under. So.
And in fact, Frank Lieb had the stock certificates in his safe. This is such a different time. Tell about that.
So the attorney actually held her stock certificates, and the people in the East who are trying to buy out the defaulting company are like sending letters to Lieb and finally show up on his doorstep and say, hand over the stock certificates. And I think they were afraid she might die in the meantime. And then what kind of complications is that going to be? So they show up, and he thought that was highly inappropriate, and he counseled her to take as long as she wanted to decide what she was going to do with those stock certificates. But yeah, so then I guess they had to carry all those stock certificates back to.
She would have had to sign them over.
Yeah.
You know, my dad from an era when people used to have stock certificates in their safes, you know. It's just such a different world that we're talking about.
She did.
I mean, it was a small valley. Everybody, you know, he was on the board of, you know, he was an advisor to Luther Burbank, he said, you know, who was an,
They were friends, actually.
yeah. And he,
You know, there's no proof that he was double dealing, but he certainly had to know everything. So, yeah, but he did her some pretty big favors legally. So setting up these trust accounts, that was really rare at the time. And he put in serious hours for that.
she was very loyal to people that worked for her. Tell us the name of, she had a woman doctor in San Jose whose name was
Dr. Euthanasia Mead.
Dr. Euthanasia Mead.
And I mean, really, don't you have to change your name if you're a physician with that name? I mean, or at least, you know, make yeah, like a little nickname or something.
But she outlived that doctor.
Yes,
She,
yes.
by several doctors. She also had a dentist whose name was
Yeah, Dr. Payne.
Dr. Payne. So I don't know. You can't make this stuff up.
These were the kind of things that kind of kept me going writing this book, because I have a quirky sense of humor.
Well, and
Anyway, I think
you
we're-
put them in. Yeah. Are we good for time now? Do we have time? Okay, we've got one in the back.
It is still there. Inglewood Drive. I won't give you the, pardon me? Oh, yeah. It was written up in Gentry magazine, like just a couple years ago, because it was renovated, and it says, you know, that she had lived there, and yeah. So I made a mistake in the book. Do you want to hear about that?
Yeah, let's hear that.
So, a couple years ago, I got a phone call from somebody from the Burlingame Historical Society. And they said, you know, we really appreciate your book, and we're trying to figure out the Burlingame properties and the way you have it laid out. It just doesn't make sense with the resources we have. And so they gave me the reasons why and stuff. Well, it turns out that I had been looking at a developer's map of Burlingame Park when it was built. So it has all the lots on it, you know, well, that's not how it was built. It was like, the first map or the first draft or the whatever.
Oh, and Burlingame was trying to find them from your directions?
The house that she lived in is still there. Yeah, yeah. And they said, you know, the picture of the house in your book is this house, you know, and you have that it's gone. And the other thing is that in Burlingame, if you drive along El Camino Real, number one, some of the numbering is changed. But number two, you know, there's huge walls and hedges that you can't really see addresses. And this particular house no longer has an address on El Camino. Its address is the next street over. So anyway, that is an error in the book. And if it ever comes out in another edition, I will correct that.
The one thing we haven't talked about that you will enjoy if you get her book are the last, the added, some of the added information she has about the tour guides at the house who started early on and over their lifetimes have been having reunions. So they contacted you after you wrote your
Yeah,
first book.
especially from the 1970s. There was a manager, Jim Marks, and his father, whose name John Marks, and they called him Coach. He managed the house for the family that owns the house, and those tour guides still get together like a class reunion. Yeah, yeah.
You also said, just to wrap up, that before it was ever an attraction, and that happened after she died, people still, it rose up so curiously on the valley floor. You know, this is a flat valley surrounded by these hills. And it had all these cupolas and different floors, and it was so large that people already were driving on Sunday, taking their neighbors out on, you know, on the roadways. It wasn't Winchester Boulevard then or 280, but people were already curious about it, which prompted probably a lot of the story.
And there were privacy signs, you know, keep out private residence, and that really put people off. Some of the neighbors were really annoyed about that.
But she was just used to that, I guess. Did she have security or how did she deal with all?
Her security was John Hanson, her ranch foreman. Yeah,
But
and servants.
she managed it.
Yeah, I don't think she worried about what people thought. I really don't think she did. You know, after you lose people close to you in your life, you might just go, like, who cares? You know, there's some stuff that's just not worth fretting about. Now, her sister, Isabel, on the other hand, if there was one off word in a newspaper, Isabel was writing the editor and, you know, and getting out there. But Sarah just wasn't like that.
And in the end, one of the reasons it became a distraction, I think, is that her other properties all sold and people either developed the land or lived in the houses. And that one was just odd enough not to sell. And so
it was appraised as of zero value after her death. And so the value was in the land, and they were going to, you know, bulldoze it and sell it for a couple orchardists did buy sections of it, 40-acre sections or whatever. By that time, there was 160 acres, including what is today Santana Row. That whole, she had an eye for real estate. I'm telling you what, SFO, Santana Row, Atherton,
Los Altos.
Los Altos.
Los Altos.
My goodness.
Yeah. So in a way, and I think you say this in the book, the house becoming an attraction saved the house, which now if you drive 280, have you seen how the trailer park has become condos and the condos are, look like they're encroaching on that property. So in a way, curiously, it acted as a sort of preservation of the home.
If the house had it been turned into a mystery house, I really don't think it would still be standing.
And now it's a California historical landmark.
Yes, although the documentation on that is very faulty.
Okay.
But that's not, it's just old. And I contacted the National Register of Historic Places and the State Office of Historic Preservation. And basically they asked me not to make trouble, just leave it. so
All right.
much for taxes.
Well, I think we should thank Mary Jo for coming today and setting us all straight. Thank you so much. Here you go. This is for you.
you. Thank you both. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming. I just want to remind you that we have an awesome slate of programs coming up. Jan and Beeman, as Robin already advertised, the historian from the Winchester Mystery House is next for our third Wednesday in September. And in October, Robin is coming back, and she's going to be talking about Sarah Winchester, the orchardist. And is going to be talking about the architecture of both of the sisters' houses. So as you've seen from tonight, you're going to want to sign up as soon as you go home. Reserve your spot. These things tend to sell out. We also have a really fun program planned on August 9th. Bring your whole family. There's gonna be a little scavenger hunt in Isabel's honor in our museum's garden to honor her love of gardening and of flowers. So keep an eye out for all of our programs. Come back and see the exhibit. Bring your friends and family. Take a postcard on your way out, and buy a book. I was getting there, Barbara. Buy it, please. Yes, if you don't have a copy, or if you do, if you brought your copy with you, Robin and Mary Jo have very graciously agreed to sign copies. So they'll be sitting right over there by the elevator. So don't miss out. And thank you all again so much for coming. Thank you so much, Robin and Mary Jo.